The pounding started just after midnight. 4 heavy thuds, then nothing. Thomas Garrett jerked awake, fingers fumbling for the shotgun propped against the wall. Colorado cold seeped through every crack in the farmhouse, wind screaming across the plains like something wild and wounded. He'd heard raccoons before, heard mountain lions scratching at the henhouse. But this was different, human. He struck a match with numb hands, lit the oil lamp, and threw on his jacket over his nightshirt. The pounding came again, weaker this time, frantic. When he pulled the door open, lamplight spilled onto a scene from hell. A woman stood there, gaunt as a skeleton, cradling a baby wrapped in a torn shawl. The child's face was pale. Behind her, 4 children clustered on the frozen porch, a boy about 10, twin girls, maybe 7, all of them shoeless with burlap sacks tied around their ankles. Their eyes were huge in their sunken faces. The woman staggered. Thomas caught her elbow before she collapsed. "Help me," she breathed. "Take my kids." Her voice broke like glass. Thomas hauled them inside, pulse racing. The children made no sound, no tears. They just watched him with that awful, silent desperation. He yanked open the wood stove, shoved in kindling, worked the bellows until fire blazed hot. The woman sank onto his bench, gripping the baby like it might vanish. The oldest boy stood guard beside her, eyes locked on Thomas with fierce distrust. "When did they eat last?" Thomas asked. 3 days, the woman whispered. "Real food? Week, maybe more." Thomas's gut twisted. He looked at those hollow faces and saw his own daughter, dead 2 years now, buried beside his wife in the plot beyond the barn. "I tried every house in the valley," the woman continued, voice barely there. "Yours was the only one with a light." The twin girls huddled by the stove, palms stretched toward the heat. Their hands were purple, nearly frozen. The youngest, a boy maybe 4, clung to his brother's shirt. "Take them," the woman begged. "I'll leave. I'll walk into the cold. Just don't let them die." Thomas knelt before her. Her eyes were blue, ringed with exhaustion and humiliation. She couldn't have been older than 30, but suffering had carved her hollow. "How far did you come?" he asked. "From the valley. 7 miles. 7 miles in this freeze with children without proper shoes." Thomas looked at their faces again, the silent prayer in their expressions. The way they leaned toward warmth, like it was salvation. He thought of his Margaret, how she'd begged him to save their daughter while fever consumed her. He'd lost them both. Never again. "I'll take you all," he said quietly. The woman's eyes flooded. She shook her head, disbelief and desperate hope fighting across her face. "You don't know what you're saying," she whispered. "I've got nothing. Can't pay. Didn't ask you to." The oldest boy grabbed Thomas's wrist. "Don't hurt her." Thomas met his gaze. "Won't. You have my word." Outside, the wind shrieked. Inside, for the first time in 2 years, Thomas's farmhouse felt like something other than a grave. Dawn broke gray and bitter across the snow. Thomas fried his last 6 eggs in the iron pan, boiled oats in the pot, sliced the remaining bacon into thin pieces. It was supposed to last him through the week. For 7 people, it would barely make 1 meal. He didn't hesitate. The children sat at his table. The woman had settled them there while he cooked, her hands trembling as she touched their hair, murmured soft words. The baby slept against her chest, breathing easier now in the warmth. Thomas set the food down. "Eat." The children attacked the meal like animals. The twin girls scooped eggs with their fingers. The youngest boy gnawed bacon, grease smearing his chin. The oldest ate carefully, deliberately, never taking his eyes off his mother. The woman pushed her plate toward the baby. "For later." "You eat," Thomas said firmly. "Baby's sleeping. You're not." The woman hesitated, then obeyed. She ate mechanically, silent tears streaming. Thomas turned away. Shame deserved privacy. When the plates were clean, the children slumped back, eyes glazed with the first fullness they'd known in weeks. The youngest climbed into Thomas's lap uninvited, curled against him, and went limp with sleep. Thomas froze, uncertain. Finally, he wrapped an arm around the boy. "So light, too light." "My name is Catherine Moore," the woman said quietly. This is Daniel, Rose, Ruth, Peter, and Anna. She pointed to each child. Thomas Garrett. Why are you doing this, Mr. Garrett? Thomas looked at the sleeping child in his arms. Because someone should have done it sooner. Catherine's face crumpled. She pressed her hand over her mouth, shoulders shaking. Daniel moved to her side, small hand on her back. Thomas waited until she steadied. What happened? My husband died 8 weeks ago, Catherine said, voice flat. Pneumonia. The town doctor wouldn't see him without money first. By the time I scraped together enough, he was gone. Thomas's jaw clenched. The landlord threw us out, Catherine continued. The churchwomen said I was reckless, that my husband's death was punishment for our sins. I tried taking in washing, sewing, anything. No one would hire me. So you walked 7 miles in the snow. I had nowhere left. Thomas looked around his farmhouse. 1 main room, 1 bed, shelves nearly empty. Cornmeal down to the bottom. Oats, almost gone. Enough for 1 man until April. For 7 people, maybe 10 days. I need to go, Catherine said suddenly. You've been kind, but I can't. Where will you go? Catherine had no answer. Thomas shifted Peter in his arms. You'll stay. We'll work out the rest. You don't have enough food. Then I'll find more. How? Thomas didn't know yet, but he'd figure it out. Rose and Ruth had fallen asleep against each other by the stove. Daniel watched Thomas with cautious, fragile hope. Catherine held Anna close, her blue eyes searching his face for cruelty, for the trap she'd learned to expect. She found nothing. Why? She whispered again. Thomas met her gaze. I know what hungry looks like. I know what cold feels like. That's reason enough. Outside, snow began falling again, soft and relentless, erasing their tracks from the valley. Inside, for the first time in months, Catherine Moore closed her eyes and felt something she'd forgotten. Safe. That night, Thomas gave the children his bed. They piled together, Daniel on the edge, the twins in the middle, Peter tucked between them. Anna slept in a crate lined with quilts, Catherine on the floor beside her. Thomas took the chair by the stove. He stared at the wall. Carved into the wood were initials, T+M, 1878. Him and Margaret, their wedding year. The memories came like ghosts. Margaret's smile, her hand in his, the way she sang while working. Then the fever, the helplessness, the midwife saying, I'm sorry, Thomas. They're both gone. Wife and daughter, both. Winter had stolen them like it stole everything. He'd carved those initials the day they'd moved in. Now they haunted him, a monument to failure. A board creaked. Catherine stood there, Margaret's old blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Thomas had given it to her earlier without thinking. It had hung unused for 2 years. I should leave, Catherine said quietly. Thomas looked at her. Why? I'm a burden. You're a mother protecting her children. That's not burden, that's courage. Catherine shook her head. The valley called me shameless for begging. Said if I was decent, God would have provided. Thomas's anger flared, sharp and hot. God did provide. He sent you here? Catherine's eyes widened. She pulled the blanket tighter, like it could shield her from kindness she didn't know how to accept. I can work, she said. I can sew, cook, clean. I can earn our keep. You already have. How? Thomas gestured at the farmhouse. The sleeping children, the crackling fire, the sense of life that hadn't existed 12 hours ago. You woke this place up. Catherine sank into the chair across from him. Anna stirred in her crate, and Catherine rocked it gently with her foot. The motion was instinctive, eternal. My husband was a good man, Catherine said. Worked hard, loved his family, but he made bad investments, trusted the wrong partners. When he died, the debts became mine. That's not your fault. The valley thinks it is. The valley's wrong. Catherine looked at him. Really looked. Her blue eyes were sharp, assessing. You lost someone. It wasn't a question. Thomas nodded. My wife. My daughter. 2 winters ago. I'm sorry. So am I. They sat in silence, 2 people hollowed out by loss, filling the quiet with shared understanding. Finally, Catherine asked, What will we do about food? I'll go to the valley tomorrow. Trade for supplies. With what? Thomas touched the compass in his pocket. His grandfather's, the only thing of value he had left. I'll manage. Catherine opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. She was learning, slowly, to accept help without fighting. Outside, coyotes yipped closer than usual. Thomas stood, checked his shotgun. Catherine tensed. They won't come near the house, Thomas said. Not with the fire, but he heard the lie in his own voice. Coyotes were getting desperate, bold from the long winter. He'd need to secure the livestock before they lost what little they had. Catherine rose, moved to the bed where her children slept. She smoothed Daniel's hair, adjusted Ruth's blanket, touched each small face with infinite tenderness. When she turned back, Thomas saw tears on her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered. Thomas nodded. Words felt hollow. Catherine returned to her spot on the floor. Thomas added wood to the stove, settled back in the chair. The initials above him caught the firelight. T+M. Maybe Margaret had sent Catherine here. Maybe this was forgiveness, a second chance at the family he'd lost, or maybe it was just survival. 2 broken people, 5 starving children, and 1 farmhouse against the cold. Either way, Thomas thought, as sleep finally claimed him, he'd see it through. Outside, the coyotes called again. Inside, 7 people breathed steady and warm. For now, that was enough. 12 days passed like ice melting. The farmhouse transformed. Catherine mended the torn linens, scrubbed the floors until they shone, organized Thomas's chaotic supplies with fierce efficiency. Daniel learned to chop kindling under Thomas's patient guidance. The twins, Rose and Ruth, helped with cooking. And Peter, the youngest boy, followed Thomas everywhere. Mr. Thomas, he called him, tugging his sleeve when he fed the animals, climbing onto his lap at meals, falling asleep against his chest each night. Thomas felt something crack open inside every time the boy said his name. Catherine watched from the kitchen, Anna balanced on her hip, a small smile touching her lips. Thomas caught her looking once and she blushed, turning back to her work. The attraction was there, unspoken but undeniable. Their hands brushed, reaching for the same bowl. Their eyes met across the room and held a moment too long. At night, lying in their separate spaces, both lay awake, aware of the other breathing. But survival came first. Anything else was a luxury they couldn't afford. The supplies dwindled faster than Thomas expected. He'd traded his grandfather's compass in the valley for cornmeal, oats, dried beef, and seed corn. It should have lasted through April, but 7 mouths ate more than one, and winter refused to release its grip. On the 12th night, Thomas counted what remained. 1 cup of cornmeal, half a bag of oats, dried beef for maybe 3 more meals. He'd have to go back to the valley. And this time, he had nothing left to trade. Catherine found him at the table, head in his hands. "How bad?" she asked quietly. "Bad." She sat across from him. "There's work in the valley. No." Thomas's voice was sharp. "They humiliated you once. I won't let them do it again." Catherine's jaw tightened. "I'm not fragile. I didn't say you were." "Then let me help." Thomas looked at her. This woman, who'd walked 7 miles in the snow to save her children, who worked, dawn to dusk without complaint, who'd survived loss and shame and kept moving. She wasn't fragile. She was iron wrapped in flesh. "I'll figure something out," Thomas said. "We'll figure something out," Catherine corrected. Daniel appeared in the doorway, barefoot and sleepy. "Are we leaving?" "No, sweetheart," Catherine said quickly. "Go back to bed. I heard you talking about food." Thomas's throat tightened. The boy was too young to carry such weight. "We're not leaving," Thomas said firmly. "This is home now." Daniel studied him with those old, knowing eyes. "Promise?" "Promise." He nodded, satisfied, and returned to bed. Thomas and Catherine sat in the firelight, the weight of that promise settling over them. "I'll go to the valley tomorrow," Thomas said. "See if Morrison will extend credit." "He won't." "Then I'll find someone who will." Catherine reached across the table, covered his hand with hers. Her palm was rough from work, warm from the fire. Thomas stared at their joined hands, afraid to move, afraid she'd pull away. She didn't. "Whatever happens," Catherine said, We face it together." Thomas nodded, unable to speak. Outside, an owl hooted. Inside, something shifted between them, partnership deepening into something more. That night, Thomas dreamed of spring. Clearwater Valley was 30 miles of frozen mud and shattered hopes. Thomas rode in at midday, the valley square busy with weekday trade. Men gathered outside the general store. Women moved between shops. Children played in the slush. He tied his horse outside Morrison's store and steeled himself. The bell rang as he entered. Morrison looked up from the counter, eyes narrowing. "Garrett, Morrison, heard you took in the Moore widow." Thomas's jaw tightened. "That's right." Morrison smirked. "Generous of you. I need supplies. Cornmeal, oats, dried meat. I can pay end of May when I sell the spring lambs." "Credit, you mean?" "That's right." Morrison leaned back, arms crossed. "How many you feeding now?" "7. On a failing farm." Morrison shook his head. "Can't do it, Garrett. You still owe from last season's tools." Thomas's hands fisted. "I'm good for it. Maybe, maybe not. But I'm not running a charity." Neither was the church, apparently. Morrison's expression hardened. "Watch yourself." Thomas bit back the words clawing up his throat. He needed supplies more than he needed satisfaction. "What about half now, half in May?" "No credit. Cash only." Thomas pulled out his remaining coins. $2. Not enough for 3 days' supplies. Morrison counted it, slid it back. Not enough. Behind Thomas, the bell rang. Mrs. Fletcher entered, the pastor's wife, nose already wrinkled in judgment. "Mr. Garrett," she said coldly, "I heard you're sheltering that woman." "I'm providing shelter to a widow and her children." "Providing more than shelter, from what people say." Thomas turned slowly. "Ma'am, if you've got something to say it clear." Mrs. Fletcher's cheeks flushed. "Decent people don't live together outside marriage. It's improper. Decent people don't let children starve either. But here we are." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish. Morrison coughed, hiding a grin. "The pastor says if you're going to keep that woman under your roof," Mrs. Fletcher continued, "you should marry her proper. Otherwise, you're living in sin." Thomas felt heat climb his neck. Not anger, realization. She was right. Not about sin, about protection. A wife had legal standing. A dependent had none. If he died, Catherine would be homeless again. But a wife could inherit the land, the farmhouse, everything. Marriage wasn't romance. It was survival strategy. "I'll think on it," Thomas said evenly. Mrs. Fletcher sniffed and swept toward the fabric display. Thomas turned back to Morrison. $2. What'll that buy?" Morrison sighed. 8 pounds of cornmeal, 4 of oats. That's it." "Fine." Thomas took the supplies and left before his pride could sabotage him further. Outside, Pastor Williams stood waiting, tall, weathered, eyes kind beneath gray brows. "Son," he said, "got a moment?" Thomas nodded. "I won't lecture you," Williams said. "But Mrs. Fletcher's got a point, even if she makes it poorly. That woman's reputation is hanging by a thread. Yours too. I don't care about my reputation. Maybe you should. For her sake." Thomas looked at the pastor, a good man, one of the few who'd spoken against the valley's treatment of Catherine. "You think we should marry?" Thomas said. "I think if you're committed to caring for her and those children, making it legal protects everyone. She might not want to marry me." Williams's eyes crinkled. "Son, I've seen how she looks at you. She'll say yes." Thomas's heart hammered. He hadn't let himself think that far, hadn't dared hope. "I'll talk to her," he said finally. Williams clapped his shoulder. "Good man." Thomas rode home through the afternoon cold, supplies tied behind his saddle, mind churning. Marriage to Catherine. The idea terrified and thrilled him in equal measure. When the farmhouse came into view, smoke rising from the chimney children, as voices drifting through the trees, Thomas realized something. He wasn't proposing out of duty. He was proposing because he wanted her to stay forever. 4 days after Thomas's return, the tax collector came. Catherine saw the wagon first, a black buggy cutting through the melting snow, official and ominous. Her stomach dropped. "Thomas," she called. He emerged from the barn, saw the wagon, and his face went stone. Gerald Pierce stepped down, banker, landowner, the man who held liens on half the valley. Beside him, the county assessor carried a leather satchel. "Garrett," Pierce said, tipping his hat with false courtesy. "Pierce, I've come about your property taxes. You're $53 in arrears." Thomas's jaw worked. "I know. Payments due in 10 days. Otherwise, the county auctions the property." Catherine's breath caught. Daniel appeared beside her, holding Peter's hand. The twins peered from behind Thomas's legs. "I'll have it," Thomas said. Pierce's smile was cold. "Will you? Heard you're feeding extra mouths now. Expensive business charity. 10 days, Thomas repeated. Pierce gestured to the assessor, who produced a document. "Sign here. Acknowledges the debt and deadline." Thomas signed without reading. Pierce tucked the paper away, eyes drifting to Catherine. "Mrs. Moore, heard you landed on your feet." Catherine lifted her chin. "I'm managing." "I'm sure you are." Pierce's tone implied things that made Thomas's fists clench. When the wagon pulled away, Catherine sagged against the doorframe. Thomas stood frozen, staring at the rutted tracks in the mud. $53, Catherine whispered. "I'll figure it out." "How?" Thomas had no answer. He'd sold everything valuable: the compass, his grandfather's rifle, Margaret's locket. All he had left was the horse and the land itself. Catherine disappeared inside, returned moments later with something clutched in her hand. "Take this." She held out a silver brooch, delicate, engraved. Thomas recognized it from her belongings. "That's your mother's," he said. It was her mother's. Worth $70, maybe more. "Catherine, no, take it." Her voice cracked. "You've given us everything. Let me give something back. I won't rob you of your past." "My past is dead." Catherine's eyes blazed. "This right here, right now, this matters. These children matter, you matter." Thomas stared at her, torn between pride and desperation. "We're supposed to be partners," Catherine continued, voice breaking. "So let me be your partner." "I can't." "You mean you won't?" "What's the difference?" "The difference," Catherine said, "is that I'm choosing this. I'm choosing you. But you're too stubborn to let me." She turned and walked inside, slamming the door. The brooch lay in the mud where she'd dropped it. Thomas picked it up, the silver cold against his palm. Behind him, Daniel stood in the doorway. "Mama cries at night," the boy said quietly. "She thinks we'll lose this place." "Lose you? You won't." "Then why are you fighting?" Thomas looked at the brooch, at the farmhouse, at this child who'd become his in everything but name. "Because I don't know how to let people help me either," he admitted. Daniel nodded, old beyond his years. "Maybe you should learn." That night, Thomas and Catherine didn't speak. She slept with the children. He sat by the stove, the brooch heavy in his pocket. At dawn, coyotes came. They hit the chicken coop like a storm, 5 of them, lean and desperate. Thomas grabbed his shotgun, fired once. The coyotes scattered, but not before killing 3 hens. He stood in the mud, surrounded by feathers and blood, and realized something. Everything was falling apart. The land, the supplies, the fragile peace. And his pride was the blade cutting it all down. He found Catherine in the kitchen, mechanically rolling dough. "I'll sell the horse," Thomas said. Catherine looked up, eyes red. "She's worth $80, Thomas continued. "Enough for the taxes and supplies through spring. That's your only way to town. We'll manage." Catherine set down the dough, wiped her hands. "We'll sell the brooch, too. Use the money for seed and livestock. Start over properly." Thomas crossed the room, cupped her face in his rough hands. "We're partners." "Yes. Then we decide together." Catherine nodded, tears spilling over. Thomas kissed her forehead, gentle, reverent. Outside, the coyotes called. Inside, 2 people made peace with sacrifice. Together. The storm came from nowhere, a late winter beast that turned the world white in moments. Thomas had ridden to the valley at dawn to sell the horse. Catherine waited by the window, Anna in her arms, watching snow pile against the glass. By noon, visibility dropped to nothing. "He'll wait it out in the valley," Daniel said, trying to sound confident. But Catherine knew better. Thomas wouldn't leave them alone in a storm. He'd ride through hell to get home. She was right. At 3 o'clock, a shape emerged from the whiteout, Thomas on foot, leading the horse through drifts that reached his waist. Catherine threw open the door, and he stumbled inside, ice crusting his beard. "You sold her?" Catherine asked. Thomas nodded, fumbling with frozen fingers to pull money from his coat. $84. "We're paid. We're clear." Catherine grabbed blankets, stripped his wet coat, rubbed his hands between hers. The children crowded close, trying to help. "You could have died," Catherine whispered. "I told you. We don't lose each other." The storm raged for 4 days. They burned through wood faster than expected. Food ran low. But they were together, and that mattered more than comfort. On the third night, Thomas found Catherine in the chair, staring at the fire. "I've been thinking," she said quietly, "about what we're doing here. This arrangement." Thomas's stomach clenched. "If you want to leave, I don't." Catherine looked at him. "But we can't keep pretending this is temporary. The children are settling. Daniel's learning to read. The twins follow you everywhere. Peter calls you Papa when he thinks no one's listening." Thomas's throat tightened. "I heard, the valley thinks we're living in sin. Maybe they're right. You want to leave?" Thomas said the words like poison. "No." Catherine stood, moved closer. "I want to stay properly. Legally. I want those children to have your name, your protection. I want," she faltered. Thomas waited. "I want to be your wife," Catherine finished. "Not because I owe you, not because it's practical. Because when I look at you, I see the man I want to build a life with." Thomas's heart hammered. "Catherine, you don't have to. I know how I feel. I don't know if I—" Catherine kissed him. It was clumsy, desperate. 2 years of loneliness and grief pouring into the touch. Thomas gasped, then kissed her back, hands fisting in her dress. When they broke apart, both were shaking. "I thought I was finished," Thomas whispered. "Finished living, finished hoping. Then you knocked on my door and everything changed. So, that's yes? That's yes." Behind them, Daniel cleared his throat. They turned to find all 5 children watching, various expressions of delight and smugness on their faces. Finally, Daniel said. Rose and Ruth giggled. Peter clapped. Even Anna gurgled approvingly. Catherine laughed, a real laugh, the first Thomas had heard. The sound filled the farmhouse like light. Outside, the storm howled. Inside, a family took shape. 3 weeks later, Thomas and Catherine stood before Pastor Williams in the Valley Church. The town had turned out, curiosity, judgment, and a few genuine well-wishers. Mrs. Fletcher sat in the front row, lips pursed. Pierce lurked in the back, arms crossed. Catherine wore a borrowed dress, mended and pressed. Thomas wore his father's suit, threadbare but clean. The children stood beside them, Daniel holding Anna, the twins scrubbed shiny, Peter clinging to Thomas's leg. Williams opened his Bible. Dearly beloved. Wait. Pierce stepped forward. The crowd murmured. Something to say, Gerald? Williams asked mildly. Just wondering about the timing, Pierce said. Man dodges taxes, then suddenly marries the woman he's been keeping. Convenient. Thomas's jaw tightened. Catherine's hand found his, squeezed. You've got a problem with me, Thomas said quietly. Say it plain. No problem. Just think folks should know what they're witnessing. Then let me tell them. Thomas turned to face the crowd. Catherine's hand stayed in his. 6 weeks ago, Thomas said, this woman knocked on my door with 5 starving children. She'd walked 7 miles in the snow because every one of you turned her away. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. She wasn't asking for charity, Thomas continued. She was begging for mercy, and she got none. Not from the church, not from the good Christian people of this valley. None. Mrs. Fletcher's face flushed. So I took them in, Thomas said. Fed them, sheltered them, and you know what? They saved me, every one of them. I was a dead man walking, and they gave me a reason to live." He looked at Catherine, her blue eyes bright with tears. "I'm marrying her because I love her," Thomas said simply. "Because those children deserve a father. Because this is right and good, and the only thing that makes sense in this world." He turned back to Pierce. "You want to judge me? Go ahead. But you'll have to judge her first. And I won't allow it." Silence. Then from the back, a weathered farmer named Cooper stood. "I'll witness it." Another man stood. Then a woman. Then more. Mrs. Fletcher remained seated, but she bowed her head, as close to approval as she'd give. Pierce's mouth thinned. He turned and left. Williams smiled. "Shall we continue?" The vows were simple. Thomas's voice shook. Catherine's hands trembled, but they spoke the words, slid Margaret's old ring onto Catherine's finger, blessed by the past, claimed by the present. "I now pronounce you man and wife." Thomas kissed his bride, and the church erupted in applause. Outside, Cooper pressed $15 into Thomas's hand. "For the children." Others followed. $7 here, a sack of cornmeal there, canned goods, a quilt, the valley's conscience stirring at last. Thomas and Catherine climbed into the borrowed wagon. Children piled around them. As they rode home, Catherine leaned against Thomas's shoulder. "Think they'll remember this kindly?" she asked. "Don't care," Thomas said. "I've got everything I need right here." Peter tugged his sleeve. "Papa?" Thomas's heart stopped. "Yes, son? Are we really a family now?" Thomas looked at Catherine, at the children, at the future stretching before them. "We really are." Spring came slowly, then all at once. Snow melted into mud, mud dried into earth, and earth cracked open with green shoots. Thomas and Catherine worked the garden side by side, him digging rows, her planting seeds, the children scattering straw. 8 weeks since the wedding. The farmhouse bore signs of permanence now. New curtains Catherine had sewn. Shelves Thomas had built. Children's drawings pinned to the walls. And Catherine's belly, just beginning to swell. Thomas noticed when she paused to press her hand there, a small smile on her lips. She caught him watching and blushed. "When?" he asked softly. "December, I think." Thomas pulled her close, kissed her temple. "Margaret would have liked you." "I hope so." They finished planting as the sun climbed. Corn, beans, squash, potatoes. Enough for 9 people, maybe 10 by winter. Daniel appeared with water. "Mama," Rose found a rabbit's nest. "Don't touch it," Catherine called. "Let the rabbits be." The twins raced past, chasing a butterfly. Peter helped Thomas pack dirt around the last seedling, his small hands mimicking Thomas's exactly. At midday, they walked to the small cemetery beyond the barn. Thomas had cleared the weeds, repaired the fence. 2 graves lay there, Margaret and their daughter. Catherine picked wildflowers, the first blooms of spring, and placed them on the stones. "Thank you," Thomas whispered to the graves, "for sending her to me." Catherine's hand found his. They stood together in the warm sun, children playing behind them, and Thomas felt something he hadn't felt in 2 years. Peace. That evening they gathered on the porch, Thomas in the chair, Catherine beside him, children sprawled at their feet. Anna dozed in Catherine's arms. Peter leaned against Thomas's leg. "Tell us a story, Papa," Daniel said. Thomas thought about it, about the pounding at midnight, the desperate woman with starving children, the choice that changed everything. "Once," he began, "there was a man who thought he was finished with living." "Was he sad?" Ruth asked. "Very sad." "What happened?" Rose pressed. Thomas looked at Catherine, at her smile, at the love in her eyes. "Someone knocked on his door," Thomas said, "and everything changed." The children listened, rapt. Catherine rested her head on Thomas's shoulder. Above them, stars emerged one by one, bright and infinite and full of promise. Somewhere in the distance, coyotes called, but they were far away, and the farmhouse glowed warm against the darkness. Did they live happily ever after? Peter asked sleepily. Thomas kissed the top of his head. They lived, and that was enough. Catherine squeezed his hand. Inside her, new life stirred, another chance, another beginning. The prairie wind carried the scent of sage and wildflowers. In the garden, seeds dreamed of sunlight. On the porch, a family breathed together. And Thomas Garrett, widower, farmer, father, looked at the life he'd built from ashes and thought, some winters break you, some winters remake you. This one gave him everything.